Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth. The glass slipped from her hand, shattered into 100 glittering pieces. And in the silence that followed, a silence so heavy it could crush air, I heard only one sound, a single breath, sharp and panicked. The sound of someone who just realized they'd lost. That's how my family dinner ended. It sounds absurd, doesn't it? A man, a table, a bottle of wine, and a quiet war. But everything began with one simple question. A question that looked innocent enough until I heard the hunger behind it. Dad, when you're gone, who does the house belong to? My name is Richard Hayes, 66 years old. I'm a retired civil engineer, the kind of man who spent his life calculating load-bearing walls, but somehow failed to see the cracks in his own family. I've lived alone for 4 years now, ever since Mary, my wife, my balance, passed away. Our home sits by the edge of a lake in Bend, Oregon, a quiet place where the trees whisper louder than people do. We built it ourselves, brick by brick, long before realtors started calling it a $2 million lakefront dream. For me, it's just home. For them, it became an opportunity. My son Michael is 38. Steady job, respectable man. His wife Rachel, polished, elegant, sharp in all the ways that make people trust her too quickly. Everyone says she's the perfect daughter-in-law. Everyone except me. I used to believe they didn't need anything from me. At least that's what I thought until the spring of 2024, when they arrived at my door carrying a bottle of expensive Bordeaux Smiles as smooth as the glass it was poured into, and a plan they believed they'd already won. Before I tell you what really happened after that smile, tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe that sometimes silence can be the strongest form of revenge, hit like, share, and subscribe, because this is the story of a father who chose to reclaim justice with nothing more than patience and a quiet mind. Bend, Oregon. March 2024. Rain was falling lightly, the kind that didn't clean the air, just reminded you it existed. The droplets clung to the window, catching reflections from the dining room lights, warm golden, and yet strangely cold. The house, usually dim, and still glowed bright that night. I had cleaned every glass, polished each fork, and laid a white linen cloth across the table, the same kind Mary used for Christmas dinners. On the table sat the Bordeaux Rachel had picked, still sealed label, facing forward like a trophy. When I heard the sound of tires crunching on gravel outside, my hand tightened around the chair. A habit I never lost to the reflex of a man who once measured steel beams for a living. The door opened. High heels echoed across the porch. Dad Rachel's voice rang out, bright, flawless, rehearsed. Behind her came Michael, carrying a bouquet of lavender, her touch, not his. And last was Emily, my 10-year-old granddaughter, her laughter cutting through the cold evening like sunlight through glass. Michael smiled as he took off his coat. "Dad, you didn't have to go all out like this." I nodded. It's been a year since we've all sat down together. Rachel set the wine on the table, eyes shining. "I picked this one because you said Mary loved this flavor." I looked at the bottle, and for a second the scent of Mary's cooking seemed to drift back into the room. "She'd be happy to know someone remembered," I said quietly. Rachel smiled, small, polite, perfectly shaped. But there was a flicker in her eyes, a sharpness too bright to belong in a family gathering. We sat down. The fire crackled softly, spreading the scent of cedar and roasted meat across the room. Rachel poured the wine carefully, slow, graceful, almost ceremonial. "It's wonderful that you wanted to talk about the future," she said. Her tone was silk smooth, soothing, dangerous. "Yes," I replied, "the future of this house." Her gaze flicked to Michael. A tiny exchange, a glance so brief most people would have missed it. But I didn't. She smiled again, practiced and perfect. I've always believed this house is the heart of our family. I looked down at my glass. And the heart, I said, is usually the first thing people try to claim. No one spoke. Only the ticking clock, steady, merciless, slicing through the silence. Then Emily's voice, innocent as a whisper. "Grandpa, can I have my own room when we move in here?" Rachel squeezed her hand, gently smiling. Michael cleared his throat, changed the subject. "Dad, property values are going up around here. If you sold this place, you could get something smaller closer to the city." I smiled. Maybe. But inside, I already knew this wasn't dinner. This was theater. And I was the invited audience watching a play written by my own family. Rachel rose from her chair, walked to the cabinet, and took out another glass. "I think the future should be planned early," she said, back, turned voice airy, casual. "I agree," I answered. She turned, setting the glass in front of me. "You should rest more, Dad. This house is too big for one man." "Thank you," I said, "but I still manage just fine." Her eyes drifted to the photo of Mary on the wall. "She must be proud seeing you keep everything just the way she left it." "No," I said, "she'd be prouder knowing I recognize when it's time to change." Rachel's smile widened, not kindness, but confirmation. Like someone who just watched the final piece of a plan fall into place. That's when I knew. She thought she'd already won. I lifted my glass, tilted it slightly. The red liquid swirled under the light, rich, thick, almost alive. Laughter rippled faintly around the table, thin, strained, hollow. The kind of laughter that comes from people who are pretending everything's fine. I breathed in the air, cedar, lavender smoke, the scent of old memories and new deceit. Then I said quietly, but clearly, "I invited you all here tonight because there's something important I need to say." Rachel tilted her head, curiosity glowing like a blade. "What is it, Dad?" I looked at her. Then at Michael, the boy who once followed me through construction sites asking why every wall needed a foundation. Now a man sitting silent, avoiding his father's eyes. "It's about the future of this house," I said. "A future that might not look the way you expect." Rachel's smile froze, a perfect mask, cracking along invisible lines. The glass slipped from her hand. Wine spilled thick and dark, staining the white tablecloth in slow, widening circles. It bled like truth finally surfacing, and that was the moment it all began. Voiceover. That night I learned something. Justice doesn't always begin with a gavel striking wood. Sometimes it starts with a smile and a drop of red wine on a white tablecloth. The next morning, Bend was wrapped in fog. Pale light slipped through the old curtains, glimmering on the floating dust like memories refusing to settle. I brewed a cup of black coffee, the kind Mary used to hate, and opened my study, the room I had kept locked since the day she died. The wooden desk was still there. The swivel chair was still there. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. And yet, something felt wrong. Like someone had been here breathing the same air while I was gone. I turned on the computer out of habit more than purpose. My inbox filled the screen. At the top sat an unfamiliar email. Subject line: appraisal value of property ready for sale. My brows furrowed. I hadn't requested any appraisal. The sender: Oregon Heritage Realty. And under the bank officer's signature, a small note: client confirms, owner will sign next week. Client name: Rachel Hayes. I sat still for several seconds. The only sound in the room was the ticking clock, steady, sharp, like the heartbeat of someone about to uncover something they never wanted to see. I clicked the attachment. Photos loaded on the screen, every corner of my home, carefully framed and brightened. The appraisal value, $2.05 million. Pictures of the living room, the kitchen, the back porch. Even the lavender garden Mary planted behind the house. The photos were taken from inside. Someone had been here. Not a stranger. My mind started connecting details. How long had it been since I last changed the door code? How many times had Rachel borrowed my keys just to tidy things up for you, Dad? I closed the laptop. The coffee had gone cold. Its bitterness lingered on my tongue. Outside, the lake looked unnaturally still, a mirror too calm to be trusted. People say the surface is quietest when the storm below is at its strongest. That morning I understood last night's dinner wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. Around noon, Rachel dropped by. She carried an apple pie, her smile sweet, flawless, as if nothing had ever happened. "Did you get the email I sent, Dad?" she asked, placing the tray neatly on the table, her voice soft as spring air. "I did," I said, eyes still fixed on the lake outside the window. "I just haven't finished reading it." "Oh," that she waved off, laughing lightly. "Just some small paperwork. I thought it'd be good to have the house reappraised in case we ever need to renovate or reinvest." She said it the way only someone confident in their charm could, each word wrapped in sincerity, each lie dressed as care. I smiled faintly. Very thoughtful. Rachel poured coffee for me, then for herself. The scent of apple pie mixed with vanilla and coffee, a warmth so perfectly staged, it felt cinematic. Her eyes wandered across the room, finally stopping on the family photo atop my desk. Mary always had an eye for picture frames, didn't she? I nodded slowly, watching her. Then I noticed something small, but enough to freeze me mid-breath. That photo was different. It used to show 3 people, Mary, Michael, and me. But the part where I stood beside Mary was cut out. Not fallen. Not damaged. Cut. Deliberately. A thin chill ran down my spine. There was no one else who could have touched it. I asked quietly, my voice calm but heavy enough to sink into the floorboards, "What do you think of this picture?" Rachel turned, smiling softly. "Nostalgic," she said. "Maybe it's time we hang some newer ones, don't you think?" I looked at her. Her eyes blue clear but cold, like glass left too long in winter. "Maybe," I said slowly. "When people are ready to replace the foundation that once held them up." She didn't understand, or pretended not to. She only smiled again, topping off my coffee. "Michael thinks this house could use a fresh start," she said. "A new chapter." "And what about me?" I asked. Rachel's smile didn't waver. "Of course, Dad. You'll always be a part of this place." A part. Not the whole. That afternoon, after they left, I stood in front of the photo frame for a long time. Tiny scraps of paper still clung to the glass, catching sunlight, like dust on a forgotten shelf. Mary once told me a house is only wood and brick. But the memories, that's what makes it alive. Now someone was trying to sell those memories and make me sign the execution order myself. I took my phone, snapped photos of the email, the cut photo, and sent them to Peter Collins, my old attorney. Only one line in the message: "I think it's time to update the will." After pressing send, I sat back, breathing deep. On the desk, Rachel's coffee cup still sat untouched. A thin film of oil floated on its surface. I poured it down the sink. The liquid ran thick, heavier than I expected. I couldn't be sure what it was. But after decades in construction, I've learned when the foundation starts to crack, you fix it, or the whole structure falls. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind coming off the lake carried the scent of damp wood and dried lavender. I turned on the hallway lights and walked slowly, my footsteps echoing down the wooden floorboards, a deep hollow rhythm like a heartbeat that didn't trust itself anymore. The walls were lined with photographs, weddings, birthdays, picnics, laughter. But now half the frames were empty. Someone had removed a few. I stopped in front of our wedding picture. Mary's face, soft and certain, looked back at me through the dim light. It felt like she was reminding me quietly, patiently, that this was not the time to yield. "I won't let anyone touch what we built," I whispered. A sudden gust rattled the window. The wooden frame creaked. A cold, dry sound like an answer. Morning came gray and silent. I stepped onto the porch to check the mail. Buried under advertisements and bills was a small yellow envelope, no return address. Inside, a flyer from Heritage Realty and a handwritten note. "Interested buyers are waiting. Don't miss your chance." At the bottom, scrawled in blue ink, "Rachel H. said you're ready to sell." I folded the paper carefully, slipped it into my coat pocket. Said nothing. The wind swept across the lake, carrying the metallic sound of the old iron gate tapping against the post. In that moment, I understood. The storm had already begun. And this time, I wouldn't be the man standing quietly on the porch, watching his house fall apart. They think I'm old, slow, too soft to fight back. But they forget I spent a lifetime building things meant to survive storms. And when the wind changes direction, I don't have to move. I just have to wait for it to carry away the ones who started it. Monday morning. Bend was still wrapped in its dull gray haze, as if even the sun was unsure whether it wanted to take part in this story. I sat behind the wheel of my old Ford pickup, the same 2004 model Mary used to call the old friend who knows too much. On the passenger seat lay a folder, the property deed, an old copy of my will, and a few family photos, edges uneven, freshly cut. They say when a man starts gathering evidence against his own family, something inside him has already died, maybe trust. Peter Collins's law office sat on the third floor of a red brick building downtown. The glass door still carried the same silver lettering it had for decades, Collins and Brenner Estate, and family law since 1982. The office smelled of oak and paper, neat, measured, untouched by time. Peter stood as I entered, offering the same firm, grounded handshake he always had. "Richard," he said warmly, "I reviewed your file. The current will still leaves everything, the house, the investments, to Michael." I nodded. "Yes, that's what I used to believe was right." Peter's gaze sharpened behind his glasses. "What made you want to revisit it?" I took a breath, then said quietly, "Let's just say, I want to make sure my estate doesn't end up in unworthy hands." Peter didn't need clarification. He opened his notebook, wrote a few words, then looked back at me. "Richard, you can create a living trust. You'll keep full control during your lifetime. After you're gone, the assets will go exactly where you choose. No one can sell, mortgage, or transfer anything without your signature." I leaned back. "Sounds like a good lock." He smiled faintly. "And like any lock, it's only necessary when someone's trying to open the door from the outside." We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the sound of cars rolled down wet streets, a steady hum beneath the drizzle. Peter broke the quiet. "You still want Michael as your beneficiary?" I looked down at the photo of Mary on the folder cover. "Maybe. But I'll need to make sure my son isn't being guided." "You're talking about Rachel." I didn't answer, just tightened my hand on the chair. That was enough for Peter to understand. He nodded slowly. "I'll prepare a draft. And Richard, be careful. Changing a will is your right. but in families that right can become the spark that burns everything. Across town, Rachel sat in her bright kitchen, a half-full glass of wine in one hand, her other scrolling through Michael's open laptop. He hadn't logged out. Her eyes caught the calendar entry. Meeting with Peter Collins, Monday, 10 a.m. A slow smile crept across her lips, thin, sharp, calculated. Screenshot. She sent it to Michael with a single message. Your father's changing the plan. Someone's putting ideas in his head. When I left Peter's office, the rain had stopped. Puddles mirrored the cloudy sky, and my reflection, a 66-year-old man, standing between two generations, one already buried, and one he no longer recognized. I stared at myself in the car mirror. They thought I was getting old. They were wrong. I wasn't fading. I was waking up. In construction, when a pillar cracks, you don't tear it down right away. You brace it. You watch. And you wait for the one who caused the damage to reveal themselves. That evening, my phone rang. It was Michael. His voice carried a note I hadn't heard in years, that uneasy mix of guilt and fear. Dad. I heard you met with Uncle Peter today. I did, I said slowly. Just going over some old paperwork. He hesitated. Rachel said, you might be changing your will. I paused long enough for the silence to make its own point. Then I answered, Son, sometimes people talk about things they don't understand, because it hides what they're afraid to lose. What do you mean? I mean, if someone's afraid of losing something, it's probably because they never truly believed they deserved it. The line went quiet. When he finally spoke, his tone had changed, softer, defensive. Dad, you've been forgetful lately. We're just worried about you. I smiled without answering. Rachel had started her game. 3 days later, Peter sent me the draft of the Living Trust. I opened the file, reading every line carefully. One sentence made me stop. Grantor retains full legal control during lifetime. I almost laughed. Such a simple sentence, something I should have done years ago. I printed it, signed a preliminary copy, and locked it in my drawer. That night, my phone buzzed. A message supposedly from Michael. Dad, maybe you don't remember, but you promised to leave the house to me. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself. No punctuation. No warmth. Only Rachel's chill dressed in my son's words. They say loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from having to prove your sanity to your own blood. I looked around the house, the photo frames, Mary's old chair by the window, the lavender she planted still holding its scent. Everything looked the same. But something had shifted, not in the walls, but in how the people inside them saw me. If you've ever been doubted by someone you raised, you'll know that feeling. It doesn't sting like betrayal. It hollows you out. Like standing inside your own home and realizing you no longer belong in the picture. Late that afternoon, I drove along the lakeshore. The wind carried the smell of wet earth and rain-soaked pine. The water glowed with the red streak of sunset, a thin wound running across the sky. In my head, I spoke to Mary. They're trying to erase me from what we built, but I won't let them touch it. I pulled over, took out my phone, and opened my notes app. Typed one simple line: Friday, meet Peter to sign official papers. Keep secret. Trust no one. A simple line. But it was the first brick in the wall I was about to rebuild. When I returned home, the mailbox was slightly open. Inside was a small business card, Peter Collins's office logo on the front. On the back, a single sentence handwritten in black ink: someone is watching you. I looked up. Down the empty street, a silver SUV idled a few houses away. Its headlights blinked once, then the car pulled off and disappeared into the fog. They say lawyers help us find justice, but sometimes it's only when justice begins to tremble that we finally see who's really holding the gavel. A week after my meeting with Peter Collins, I thought things had finally gone quiet. Then right at 9 a.m. on Friday, my phone rang. The man on the other end sounded nervous. "Mr. Hayes, this is Tom Becker from Oregon First Bank. I'm calling to confirm your signature on a refinancing file submitted last week." "Was that you?" I straightened up in my chair. "Refinancing," I said slowly. "I haven't filed for anything." Tom hesitated. "I understand, sir, but the file has your signature. I'll send you the scanned copy to verify." A minute later, the new email arrived. I opened the PDF. There it was, my name, Richard E. Hayes, in perfect loops and pressure strokes. But something was off. The pen weight was too heavy, the angle too clean. Whoever did this had practiced. It looked right, but it wasn't mine. Tom's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Mr. Hayes, the submission also included a copy of your driver's license. It's your face, but the background is blue, the old format DMV stopped using 3 years ago." "Who sent it?" I asked. He exhaled. "We don't know, sir. All we have is an email, sharehaysconsult@gmail.com. I almost laughed. Rachel Hayes? Consult. Polite. Professional. And utterly shameless. That evening, the wind off the lake was rougher than usual. Rain fell in slow, heavy drops, each one hitting the window like a warning. I sat alone in the living room. Only half the lights were on. Every flash of lightning lit up the house for a split second, revealing the corners I hadn't dared to face in months. I turned on the security monitor, a habit Mary used to call paranoia. But tonight, it felt like insurance. I scrolled back through the footage from Tuesday night, 10 p.m. There she was. Rachel's white SUV pulling up to the gate. She stepped out, long coat, a black leather folder in her hand. No knocking, no porch light, just the soundless rhythm of a plan in motion. She unlocked the side door with her own key. On the screen, I watched her walk straight to my office. She sat down in my chair, pulled a silver pen from her pocket. Her hand moved for a few seconds, then she closed the folder, stood and turned, looking directly into the camera. And then she smiled. A short, thin, lifeless smile. The kind only a person with no fear can give. Not a shred of criminal evidence. Just the look of someone who already believed she'd won. I poured myself a drink, whiskey, 2 fingers. The glass felt heavy, colder than the rain outside. On the table lay an old leather notebook. Mary's handwriting on the cover still read, "Every detail matters." I opened to the first blank page and wrote, March 17th. Call from Oregon First Bank. Fake refinancing file. Forged signature. 10 p.m. Tuesday. Rachel seen entering house with folder. No announcement. I wrote slowly, deliberately. Not because I was afraid I'd forget, but because I knew one day those details would speak for me when silence no longer could. They say no one steals your soul all at once. They take it piece by piece, one signature, one conversation, one favor disguised as care. The next morning, I met Peter Collins again. He watched the security footage 3 times, then rubbed his forehead. "There's no clear crime here," he said, "but it could prove intent. She had no right to enter without your consent." I asked, "If she forged those documents, can I charge her?" Peter shook his head. "Not unless we can tie her directly to the submission. A forged signature and a silent video. It's suspicion, not proof." I nodded. "Then we let her believe I still don't know." Peter stared at me, half concern, half respect. "What are you planning, Richard?" I smiled faintly. "Rebuilding the foundation. But this time not to live on. To bury what needs to be buried." That night, I began keeping a full record. Not just dates and times, but sounds, smells, light. Every call, every visit. I wrote down the moments Rachel phoned to check in. The texts Michael sent asking if I was forgetting things again. Each note was a nail driven deep into the ground, securing the structure I was building, in silence, a defense made of truth and patience. I printed the forged signature, pinned it beside Mary's photo. Not as a reminder of fear, but as proof that justice often begins with a single wrong stroke of a pen. 2 days later, Tom Becker called again. His voice trembled slightly. "Mr. Hayes, someone came into the branch today, asking to withdraw your old mortgage file. Said she was your legal representative. I didn't need to ask. Still I did. Her name, Rachel Hayes." I smiled. "And you gave it to her?" "Sir, I remembered what you told me. Don't release any documents unless you hear my voice." I was silent for a moment. "Good man, Tom. Thank you." When I hung up, sunlight had turned amber through the window, spilling across my desk like diluted blood. I looked at my reflection in the glass, older maybe. Tired, sure, but no longer afraid. The game had shifted. She thought she was pushing me to the edge. But Rachel forgot one thing: I spent my life working on structures suspended hundreds of feet in the air. I know how to stay steady even when the ground begins to shake. I closed the notebook, locked the office door, and turned off the lights. Before leaving, I glanced once more at the security monitor, the empty room glowing faintly under the red blinking light. And I said softly, almost to the dark itself, "All right, Rachel. If you want to play in the dark, I'll make sure the light stays with me. The storm doesn't come from far away. It starts under your own roof with the person you once believed was holding the umbrella." 3 days later, the sky over Bend was unnaturally clear. The oak trees behind my yard stood perfectly still, no wind, no birds. That kind of silence makes builders uneasy. It's the silence before a collapse, when pressure is already cracking the beams from within. I was trimming the hedge when I heard a familiar voice. "Richard, I brought apple pie." Linda Monroe, my neighbor on the other side of the wooden fence, appeared with a steaming tray in her hands. 60, widowed, practical one, of the few people left in this town I could still trust. She came closer, lowered her voice. "I don't mean to intrude on your family business, but there's something you should know." I nodded. "Go ahead, Linda." She looked around, making sure no one was within earshot. "Last night around 11, I was outside watering the garden. I heard Rachel on her phone right by the fence. She said, and I quote, 'Once he signs, the house is mine.' I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't even feel surprised. Just cold." Linda hesitated. "Maybe I misheard, but—" "You didn't," I said quietly. She looked at me, her eyes full of worry and pity. "What will you do?" I smiled faintly. "What people rarely do anymore, I'll listen. To defeat a liar, you don't always need to speak. You just need to let them think you still are." Sunday morning. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Paul's Church. The bells rang across the brick-lined streets, a sound that once meant faith, now it just echoed habit. I hadn't attended service since Mary died, but today wasn't about God. It was about Rachel and Michael. I sat in the last pew. They were 3 rows ahead, Rachel in a beige coat, hair tied up neatly, face calm, pleasant, perfect. Everyone liked her. Her smile, her posture, the way she touched Michael's arm when she laughed. It was all choreography, grace with intent. When Pastor Helen Brooks finished her sermon, Rachel stood. Her voice carried across the church, clear and sweet. "Pastor, we wanted your advice. My father-in-law, Richard Hayes, has been living alone for quite some time. We think it might be best to move him somewhere safer, where he can have professional care." Dozens of eyes turned toward me. I didn't move. Helen studied Rachel, then smiled gentle but with steel underneath. "Rachel," she said softly, "care should never begin with taking away someone's home." A ripple of silence spread through the room. Rachel's smile faltered just slightly before she steadied it again. "I only want him to be safe," she replied. Helen's voice dropped lower. "Safe? Then why do I hear you met with a bank representative last week?" The air left the room. Michael looked down. Rachel went pale. Helen continued, measured and deliberate. "Prayer is meant to bring peace, not to cover calculation." I watched Rachel's face harden. Her hands tightened around her purse. She didn't look back at me. Her wall of perfection had cracked. She didn't respond, just grabbed Michael's arm and left the church in silence. That afternoon, I returned home. The kitchen smelled of coffee and rain. A small envelope lay half-tucked under the door. No sender. Inside, a printed email. From rhayesconsult@gmail.com. Subject line: authorization for refinance. Signed by owner. I sat down, studying the paper. At that moment, the phone rang. Tom Becker again. "Mr. Hayes." "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice tight. "Someone tried to request your mortgage documents again. We turned them down." "You did right, Tom. Thank you." Through the window across the lake, a small figure stood, thin, blonde, holding a phone. Rachel. Even from that distance, I could see her gesturing toward my house as she spoke. A liar never knows when to stop. The more they talk, the more they reveal. By evening, Linda came over again, a basket of bread in hand. "I heard what happened at church," she said. "Guess she didn't take it well," I smiled faintly. "No, but she's about to learn what a real sermon sounds like." Linda sat down, her eyes scanning the house. "Richard, I know you want to keep this quiet, but Rachel's not the type to quit. If you need a witness, I'll stand by you." I nodded slowly. "If the time comes, I'll call." She looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, "You know, Mary once told me something. She said, when Richard goes quiet, it means he's rebuilding his walls." "Is that what you're doing now?" I looked toward Mary's photo on the wall. Smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Not just walls, Linda. Traps." That night, I reopened my notebook. Wrote down everything: the date, Rachel's words, Michael's reaction, Helen's comment. Every detail, every silence, every tremor. Ink bled slightly under the desk lamp, like veins of truth pushing through paper. I looked around the room, listening to the soft rain tapping the metal roof. When someone wants to erase you from their life, they don't use a knife. They use words, doubt, and counterfeit kindness. I closed the notebook, walked to the window, and stared out across the lake. Far off, a car's headlights flared, then vanished. She was watching. Or maybe she wanted me to think she was. I turned off every light in the house. The room went dark except for the small red blink of the security camera. I stood there, my reflection faint against the glass. And I said quietly, each word deliberate, cold, "You want me gone, Rachel? Go ahead. Try. But remember, when you blow out someone else's light, the only thing left to shine is on you." Tonight I realized something. Rachel didn't just want the house. She wanted to erase me from my son's life, and if that's the game she's chosen, I'll let her play until she falls into the hole she's been digging. That night, Bend turned cold again. Rain slanted against the windows, leaving long streaks like claw marks on glass. I sat in my study. The yellow lamp cast a circle of light across the old wooden desk. The same one where Mary and I used to sit for hours, calculating every brick, every loan, when this house was nothing but blueprints and hope. On the wall, our wedding photo hung slightly crooked. I stood to straighten it, and as I pulled open the drawer beneath the shelf, my hand brushed against something cold. A steel lockbox, Mary's old safe. I hadn't opened it since she died. The key was still in the desk. The lock clicked open with a soft metallic sigh. Inside, a few old documents, a silver necklace, and a small black USB drive labeled in Mary's handwriting, for Eleanor or Peter only. Eleanor was Mary's sister. She passed away last year, which left me. I plugged it into the computer. One file appeared. Mary Hayes Final.mp3. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, low, calm, and heartbreakingly familiar. If you're hearing this, it means someone is trying to take what we built. Don't yield, Richard. People reveal who they are when they stand before someone else's fortune. And when that happens, remember, you're not alone. I didn't move. Her voice ran through me like current through steel, burning and steady. For a moment, the room seemed brighter, though the lamp hadn't changed. They say the dead are silent, but maybe they're just waiting for us to be quiet enough to hear them speak. I opened my notebook and wrote on a fresh page March 24th. Mary already said it. Don't yield. The next morning I called Peter Collins. Peter, I said, I'm ready to sign the living trust. Today. He sounded surprised but not hesitant. Understood. I'll have it ready. 2 hours later, we sat in his office. Light filtered through the blinds, cutting across the wooden desk, where 2 documents lay side by side. Peter explained carefully, his tone measured, this trust will be called the Hayes Family Education Fund. You retain full authority while alive. After you pass, the assets won't go to Michael directly. They'll go to a scholarship fund in Mary's name. No one can sell, mortgage, or transfer this property without your signature. I picked up the pen. The sound of ink on paper was dry final, like a door locking behind an intruder. Peter nodded. There. Now you can rest easy. I looked him in the eye. No, Peter. Now it begins. That afternoon, when I got home, Rachel was already waiting on the porch, holding a paper bag, and that same polite smile. Dad, I made your favorite Greek chicken salad. Then she added sweetly, I also brought a few insurance forms for you to sign. Nothing big. I invited her in, voice calm as ever. We sat at the dining table, the same table still faintly stained with red wine from a few weeks ago. She opened the folder and slid it toward me. These are just authorization papers, she said lightly, so I can renew your property insurance. You don't need to worry, I'll handle the details. I put on my glasses. Page 1 read, Authorization for Renewal of Property Insurance. Page 2, in smaller print, beneficiary Rachel Hayes. I looked up, smiled faintly. Always so thorough, I said. You remind me of Mary. Rachel smiled back, confident. I just want to help Dad. I signed. Slowly. Smoothly. The picture of compliance. She didn't know there was a tiny camera under the vase on the table recording every second. When she left, I called Peter. Peter, I just signed something Rachel brought over. I'm sending you a photo. 2 minutes later, he called back, his voice sharp. Richard, that's a fraudulent transfer form. If you had signed it for real, she'd have legal authority to sell your house. I smiled. I know. I didn't sign it with my real signature. But now, we have evidence. I replayed the footage. Rachel's voice, clear, soft, deliberate. Thank you, Dad. I'll take care of everything. That look in her eyes, not of a daughter, but of a predator who thinks the hunt is over. That night, I sat on the porch. The sound of frogs carried from the far side of the lake. I could almost hear Mary again, her words from the recording, still echoing. If they want what's yours, let them think they're close to having it. I looked out at the lavender field, most of it dry now, brittle with time. I picked a stem, crushed it between my fingers. The scent rose softly, faint but lasting, like her. Some warnings don't come from the law. They come from the souls of the gone, not loud enough to scare you, just enough to keep you from pretending you didn't hear. The next day, I met Peter again. He laid Rachel's forged document beside the living trust I had signed. See, he said. They're opposites. She knows the law. She knows all she needs is one careless moment from you, and she could have this house transferred in 48 hours. I stared at the papers. This isn't greed anymore, Peter. This is premeditated crime. He nodded grimly. I'll keep everything, the video, the fake form, the bank correspondence in my safe. From now on, any legal or financial contact goes through me. Direct confirmation only. Good, I said quietly. Now let's see how far she's willing to go. When I stepped out of his office, a silver SUV was parked across the street, the same one I'd seen the night she broke into my house. Through the tinted glass, someone was holding up a phone, filming me. I didn't look away. The wind caught my hair, the sunlight hitting the windshield so that her reflection and mine merged into one. And I whispered just enough for myself to hear, "You've gone too far, Rachel." And so have I. They say justice arrives when every other door has closed. But I've learned sometimes justice speaks through the voice of someone the world believes is gone. 3 days after meeting Peter, I thought things had calmed down. But silence sometimes is just the sound of something about to explode. At 9 a.m. Wednesday, my phone rang. Tom Becker's voice, polite as always, but strained. Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry to bother you again, but I need to confirm a transaction from your supplementary credit card. I frowned. I don't have a supplementary card, Tom. He paused. According to our records, there's one under the name Rachel Hayes. Transaction amount $4,800. Tiffany & Company, Portland branch. I sat still. My hand tightened around the phone. I never authorized any secondary card. Tom exhaled slowly. Then we have a problem. The account was opened online, verified with a driver's license. It's your photo, but with the blue background. Same old format, same as the fake mortgage file. I let out a dry laugh. She's repeating her tricks, Tom. Keep every copy of the transaction for me. Of course, Mr. Hayes. And, sir, I suggest locking all sub-accounts. The sooner the better. Some calls aren't warnings. They're nails being driven into the coffin of trust. That afternoon, I called Michael. My voice was calm. Son, did you or Rachel open a secondary card under my account? He hesitated. No, Dad. But Rachel said the bank suggested it to make bill payments easier. Is something wrong? Nothing, I said evenly. Just wanted to make sure you know who's spending my money. A long pause. Then Michael's voice came back quieter. Dad, Rachel's just trying to help. Don't make this harder than it is. I hung up. My eyes hardened. That evening, Rachel appeared. No text, No call. She came holding a silver-blue gift box, Tiffany ribbon tied perfectly. "Dad," she said warmly, "I wanted to surprise you. It's nothing big." I opened it. Inside, a new wristwatch. Shiny, expensive, loud in its silence. "I noticed your old one was getting old," she smiled. "This one fits a successful man like you better." I looked at her, my tone steady. "It's beautiful, though I don't remember asking anyone to buy it for me." Rachel froze for half a beat, then placed a hand dramatically over her chest. "Are you accusing me?" She turned to Michael. "I was just trying to do something nice. Why does everything I do get twisted?" Michael sighed, reaching to comfort her. "Rachel, come on. Dad didn't mean it that way." And then the tears. Perfectly timed. I only wanted things to be easier for him. If he doesn't like it, I'll return it. "I'm sorry." Gaslighting is an art form. She turns guilt into virtue and the victim into the villain for daring to doubt. The next morning, Linda Monroe came by. She carried a bouquet of yellow roses, but her eyes looked uneasy. "Richard," she said softly, "I got these from Rachel this morning. She asked me to talk you into selling the house before the market drops. Said I could help you see things more realistically." I smiled thinly. "And what did you tell her?" Linda hesitated. "I told her I don't meddle in other people's families. But..." She lowered her voice. She left an envelope. "Inside there's a receipt under your name. Secondary card. Tiffany and Company. I think you should see it." I opened the envelope. It was real. The print, the stamp, the signature, all forged but clean. My name in bold, Richard E. Hayes. I looked up. My voice dropped. "Sometimes people don't steal money, Linda. They steal your image and leave it in places where others will believe it belongs." She placed a hand on my shoulder. "Richard, I believe you. And if you need it, I'll testify. Don't let them take everything." For the first time in years, I felt someone standing on my side of the line. I nodded slowly. "Thank you, Linda. Justice always begins with one person willing to believe." That night, I rechecked the cameras. Footage showed Rachel leaving Linda's house around 10 a.m. Her stride fast, face tight. Before getting into her SUV, she looked around, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. I wrote in my journal, March 27th, "Rachel's afraid. Not of guilt, but because she knows I've stopped believing." 3 days later, Tom sent me the full statement. In addition to Tiffany, there was a $1,202 payment to a Portland interior design firm. Description: deposit for property staging. Lakeview Home. Lakeview Home. My address. Rachel had already paid to stage my house for sale. I didn't feel angry, just cold. Like the moment a builder realizes the house he raised is being quietly dismantled one brick at a time by someone who still smiles and asks, "Do you like it, Dad?" Late afternoon. I walked over to Linda's. The house smelled of cinnamon and basil tea. "I spoke to Pastor Helen," she said quietly. "If needed, she's willing to confirm Rachel tried to have you moved into assisted care." I nodded. "Thank you. I need every piece. It's almost time." Linda looked at me carefully. "You have a plan." I turned toward the window. The sun was setting over the lake, the water dark red like cooling metal. "Yes," I said, "but not revenge. I just want them to see themselves in the mirror they tried to shatter." As I stepped out into the night, wind swept through the yard, rattling the old fence. Behind me, a faint sound, tires on gravel. A black car idled at the corner, its headlights flaring straight into me, then flicking off. No plates, no movement. They say justice needs evidence, but sometimes people confess by trying too hard to prove they're innocent. Wind rippled across the lake, carrying the scent of dried lavender. I tightened my grip on the notebook in my hand. My eyes were steady now, unshaken. In that darkness, I knew I was no longer alone. And in this quiet war, Linda had just become my first ally and the first witness to the truth waiting to surface. There are days when Bend feels too quiet. So quiet, it starts to sound like a warning. No cars on the road, no wind brushing the trees, only the still surface of the lake, and a sky so pale it looked unfinished, like a page waiting for someone to write the truth on it. I was in the workshop behind the house mending the old wooden frame that once held Mary's favorite photograph. Not because I missed her, but because fixing things kept my hands busy while my mind learned not to shake from anger. The hum of the drill stopped, then the crunch of tires on gravel. I didn't expect anyone today. A pause, then the soft creak of the back door opening. Dad. Can I come in? Michael's voice. He stepped inside looking like he'd been carrying something heavy for days, the kind of tired that doesn't come from work, but from pretending you still believe someone you love. The door's always open, son. He came closer, glancing at the scattered tools, the wood dust, the half-finished frame, all the things that had outlasted peace. Rachel said you've been avoiding us, he said finally. She's worried. Are you okay? I wiped my hands on a rag, then looked him square in the eyes. No, I'm fine. Just learning how to stay quiet at the right time. He gave a half smile, that nervous one he had as a kid when he used to hide a broken window behind his back. Rachel really cares about you, Dad. She's afraid you're being manipulated. By someone. Someone. He hesitated, then said Peter Collins. I let the name hang in the air like smoke, then smiled thin-dry. Well, I said that's funny. I was about to ask you the same question, who's manipulating who? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence between us was heavy, like standing on a bridge you're not sure will hold. Michael, I said slowly, people lie for many reasons. Some for greed, some for fear. But the most dangerous kind lie because they believe you're too kind to fight back. Before he could respond, a voice came from the doorway. Michael. Oh, you're here. Rachel. She stepped in, holding a shopping bag, and wearing that same warm, polished smile, the one she put on like lipstick. Dad, she said, I brought pastries. Your favorite kind, remember? I looked at her. The smile landed exactly where she wanted it to, between sincerity and performance. Thank you, I said quietly, but I'm full. The sweetness in her voice cracked. I don't understand why you're being so distant. All I've ever done is help. If you already signed the papers, why pretend you didn't? Michael frowned. Rachel, that's enough. She turned to him, eyes glossy, voice trembling perfectly. You always defend him even when he treats me like some kind of intruder. I stood. The light from the window caught my face, half in gold, half in shadow. You're right, Rachel. Something here is strange. Because only people who lie for a living think everyone else is pretending. Her hand tightened around the strap of her purse. Her jaw twitched, but she swallowed the rage and turned away. The door slammed behind her. Silence again. Michael sat there staring at the floor as if he'd just watched a mask fall off and wasn't ready to see the face beneath. Dad, he said finally, why do you sound like this has already gone too far? I picked up the wooden frame, ran my thumb along its edge, and said, because it has. That night, Michael drove back to their downtown apartment. Rachel was in the shower. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, his first in months, and opened his laptop maybe to distract himself. On the desktop sat a folder titled Documents RH. He clicked. Inside scans, receipts, property records, old mortgage forms, and at the very bottom, Hayes, signature, practice, PDF. He opened it. 17 pages, each filled with the same signature over and over. R. Hayes, R. Hayes, R. Hayes. Some shaky, some perfect. Each stroke smoother, more deliberate. Practiced. In the corner, a note written in delicate handwriting. Keep sample close to final for digital submission. It was Rachel's handwriting. Michael's hand began to shake. The whiskey glass trembled against the table. Every warning I had given him, every doubt he'd dismissed with the words, "Dad's just paranoid," now stared at him from the screen. It's cruel how trust works. Sometimes you have to lose it to finally see who's been holding the knife. He sat there for a long moment, just breathing, as if afraid the truth would make the walls collapse. Then Rachel's voice broke the quiet. "Hey," she called, stepping out of the bathroom, towel around her hair. "What are you doing?" He minimized the folder, his voice calm, too calm. "Just checking some documents." "Documents?" she asked, smiling. "You don't trust me, I do," he said softly. "So much that I'm wondering how long I've been blind." Her smile faltered. "Excuse me." He stood, walked toward her, his voice low but steady. "I saw it, Rachel. The signatures, the forged papers, even your practice sheets." For a moment she said nothing. Then she laughed, short, sharp, hollow. "You think you've uncovered something big?" "What now, Michael? You'll turn in your own wife?" "No," he said. "I'll let you turn yourself in." Her laughter died. Her voice turned to ice. "You'll regret that." Maybe, he said, but not tonight. She turned away, voice shaking, but venom still dripping. "You and your father. You both treat me like I don't belong. But you forget. I'm the one holding the keys." The bedroom door slammed. Hours later, Michael sat alone in the dim light of the living room. The glow from his laptop washed his face in pale blue. He opened his messages, scrolled through my old texts. One stood unread, sent weeks ago. "Son, if you ever realize something's wrong, don't be angry. I'm only trying to protect what belongs to our family." He read it once, twice, then again. And for the first time, he understood every word. Sometimes it takes a fall to see who pushed you. Near midnight, while Rachel slept, Michael opened the security feed from their home system. Scrolling through old clips, he stopped at one from a week earlier. Rachel leaving the house at 12:37 a.m., car trunk full of files. She returned at 3, smiling alone in the dark driveway. He downloaded the video, attached it to an email, and sent it to me. No subject. No words. Just a message in the body line. I saw it. Then he shut the laptop. The room was quiet again. Too quiet. He turned to the framed wedding photo on the shelf. The smiles, once bright, once honest, now looked like something else entirely. Masks carved out of memory. He reached out, touched the glass, and whispered almost to himself, "Love blinds you. But when light finally comes back, the first thing you see is always the blood." I once thought my son was lost. But sometimes people don't disappear. They just fall asleep inside someone else's lie. And when they finally wake, it's the liar who should be afraid. Morning in Bend felt pale and still enough to make you suspicious. The lake was wrapped in fog so thick you couldn't tell where the sky ended and the water began. I brewed my coffee, stood by the window, and looked at the lavender plants outside, the ones Mary had planted, now dry, brittle, ghosts of a summer that never came back. Rachel's voice echoed in my head, that last icy sentence from the day she left my house. You and your father forget. I'm the one holding the keys. No, Rachel. The keys are right here in my pocket. And tomorrow night you'll finally see you never held a damn thing. Across town, Rachel was on the phone with her closest friend, her voice light, confident, dangerous. Tomorrow night, she said, I'll officially own the $2 million house. Everything's set. Michael doesn't know, but I'll make him sign the transfer papers at dinner. Her friend hesitated. You're sure he'll sign? Rachel laughed, a sound that could cut glass. Trust me. He's too old to understand what's happening. And if he does, I've got his signature ready anyway. She looked into the mirror, touched up her lipstick, and added softly, I'm inviting my mother too. She'll witness it. After tomorrow night, the name Hayes will belong to me. The clever always forget every perfect road hides a curve you can't see coming. Meanwhile, in Peter Collins's office downtown, 4 of us sat in silence, me, Peter, Tom Becker from the bank, and Linda Monroe. No one smiled. No one even shifted. The air felt dense, like right before a thunderstorm. Peter opened his leather case, pulled out a thick envelope sealed in red wax. Living Trust, Hayes Family Education Fund. Next to it, a small black USB drive. He said quietly, This is the official copy, Richard, along with Mary's voice recording. I've verified it airtight, legally binding. Tom slid a separate folder across the table. Bank records, receipts, forgery reports. This proves Rachel used fake identification to open a secondary credit card. Under your name, he said. Fraudulent purchases. Tiffany, a staging company, multiple withdrawals. If needed, I'll testify. Linda took out a small notebook, pages filled with neat handwriting. Everything she told me, the calls, the text messages, the night she said, Once he signs, that house is mine. It's all here. I nodded slowly. For a moment it felt like standing at the base of one last construction site, not to build, but to dismantle with precision. Peter looked up. Richard, are you sure about this? After tomorrow, there's no going back. I met his eyes. I don't need a way back, Peter. I just need a clean ending. I glanced at the sealed envelope on the table, then said quietly, When I say Mary would be proud of this family, that's your cue. Play the recording. Only then. Peter nodded once. Understood. I stood, shook his hand. Thank you, Peter. You kept me from drowning in silence too long. Justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it sits across the table in the shape of a friend who still believes in right and wrong. By evening, Ben's long shadows stretched across my porch. I polished the dining table set, each fork, each glass, like a man preparing for battle in the language of manners. The sunset spilled gold across the windows, making the room glow warm but cold underneath. I opened the cabinet, took out an extra wine glass, and set it beyond the empty seat, Mary's seat. 10 years since our last dinner together. 10 years since laughter filled this room. But tonight, that glass would sit in its place again, not as memory, but as witness. I opened the window. Cold air from the lake drifted in, carrying the smell of water and old wood. Outside, the reflection of dusk bled red across the lake like diluted blood spreading through glass. I picked up my recorder, pressed the red button, and spoke slowly, my voice steady. April 3rd. Everything's ready. If anyone ever finds this, know that what I did wasn't born of hate, but of promise. To Mary and to myself. I placed the recorder back in the drawer next to the duplicate copy of the trust. Then I looked at the photo of Mary on the wall. Light hit half her face, and for a second, her smile almost looked alive again. "Tomorrow, Mary," I whispered, "they'll hear your voice again. And this time they'll have no choice but to listen." Across town, Rachel was picking out a dress. She stood in front of the mirror, phone in hand, texting Michael, "Dad wants a family dinner. Be gentle with him, make him feel comfortable. After that, you just need to sign the confirmation. I'll handle the rest." Michael read the message. The screen light reflected in his eyes two hollow mirrors of a man who finally saw through the fog. He didn't reply, didn't type, didn't even breathe for a few seconds. He just looked up at the wedding photo on the wall, Rachel's smile frozen in time. A smile that now felt sharper than any blade. He deleted the message, opened the video file he'd sent me, the one showing Rachel practicing my signature. He pressed play. The sound of pen strokes filled the silence. And in that quiet, he understood tomorrow wouldn't be a dinner. It would be a trial, and no one at that table would walk away the same. That night, I stepped out onto the porch, lit a cigarette, my first in 10 years. Mary used to hate the smell. But tonight, the smoke felt like something leaving me, anger, grief, or maybe the last trace of mercy. I exhaled, watching the smoke curl upward into the dark. Justice doesn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs a quiet room and the truth spoken at the right time. I stubbed out the cigarette, walked back inside, and looked at the table one last time. 4 glasses waited. One for me, one for Michael, one for Rachel, and one for Mary. Tomorrow night, only one of those smiles would still be standing. That evening, the sky over Bend hung heavy and gray, a sheet of dull steel stretched over the town. No rain, no wind, just that unnatural silence that comes when the world itself is holding its breath. I woke early, walked the lake's edge. The water mirrored my face, older, tired, but calm in a way that frightened even me. I knew one thing: no one would leave tonight's table the same as they arrived. By 7 o'clock, the dining room glowed beneath soft golden light. Wine glasses gleamed in perfect lines, their reflections red as blood. The white tablecloth looked untouched, pure as truth before it's spoken. I stood at the head of the table. To my left, Michael's chair. To my right, Rachel's. And beside me, as always, an empty place set for Mary. The door opened. Rachel's voice came first, smooth, confident, as if she'd already won. "Dad," she said brightly, "it's so wonderful we can finally sit together again." Michael followed behind her, silent. Peter Collins arrived last, carrying his leather case. His expression firm, but in his eyes I saw something else, the quiet loyalty of a man who still believes in truth. Rachel set a bottle of red wine on the table, smiling wide. "Before we start," she said, "let's make a toast to the future." I nodded. "Go ahead." The glasses touched. A delicate clink. Small sound, but sharp enough to mark the moment before everything broke. Not every toast is sincere. Some words are born just to sweeten the taste of betrayal. Rachel's smile widened, her tone dripping with honey. "So, Dad," she began, "you wanted to talk about the will, right? It's wonderful that you're planning ahead. After all, we're family." She said family, like a surgeon says, incision precise, practiced, and meant to cut. I rose slowly, the air around us tightening. "Yes, Rachel," I said. "Because we're family, I want everyone to hear this together." Under the table, Rachel's hand found Michael's, squeezing once. Her eyes glinted, that spark of someone who thinks they've already won. Michael didn't look at me. Peter opened his case. The red-sealed envelope slid across the table. The room grew heavier, as if gravity itself had chosen a side. I spoke, my voice steady. After careful thought, I've made my decision. This house, the place where Mary and I built our lives for over 30 years, will belong to no one. Rachel's smile froze. Do you mean sell it? I shook my head. No. I've transferred it into a living trust, the Hayes Family Education Fund. It will help underprivileged engineering students here in Oregon. I'll live here until I die, but after that, this house will belong to no one person, not anymore. Time stopped. Rachel blinked once, twice, as if trying to rewrite what she'd just heard. Michael looked at her confused. Peter placed the papers on the table. The notarized seal gleamed under the chandelier. Undeniable. Irrevocable. I looked around the table, my gaze landing on Rachel last. You were right, Rachel, I said quietly. I couldn't have done this alone. Mary made the choice for me. And now she'll say the rest. Peter pressed play. From the small speaker came Mary's voice, warm, steady, and haunting in its calm. If you're hearing this, it means you kept your promise, Richard. Protect what we built. This house isn't just wood and stone. It's proof that trust can be rebuilt and that sometimes justice comes from those who've already left. The sound filled the room, not loud, but powerful enough to stop every heartbeat. Rachel stood so fast her chair toppled. Her voice cracked, sharp, desperate. Dad, you can't do this. This house belongs to Michael. It's what Mom wanted. Peter's tone remained calm, professional. Not anymore, Mrs. Hayes. The old will was superseded. This is a new, legally certified document, effective immediately. Rachel spun toward Michael, her face twisted with disbelief. Are you just going to let him take everything? Michael didn't answer. He only looked at her, a look that said he finally saw her clearly. I stepped forward, my voice low but steady steel without heat. You're right, Rachel. I couldn't do this alone. But Mary could. And she just did. Rachel staggered back, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Her lips trembled. Her eyes wide, not with anger anymore, but with the naked terror of someone watching their reflection shatter. The gold light turned her face pale. For a moment, she looked less like a person and more like a ghost who'd just realized her haunting days were over. People say the past is only memory, but sometimes memory speaks and it chooses the perfect moment to be heard. Peter gathered the documents back into his case. Linda, sitting at the far end, quietly poured herself a glass of water, her eyes never leaving Rachel. Tom Becker stood by the doorway, silent witness. His expression carried the kind of awe men have when they see a building collapse without ever hearing the explosion. I looked around the room. Every object glowed as if touched by Mary's presence. The empty glass, her chair, the framed photo above the mantel. I said softly, not to anyone in particular, Mary would be proud of this family. And in that stillness, a breeze slipped through the open window. Just a whisper. But to me it sounded like an answer, I know. Rachel broke first. The tears came real this time, not performance, not strategy. She knew it was over. Every plan, every forged signature, every carefully laid lie dismantled in less than 10 minutes. Michael stood. He slipped off his wedding ring, set it on the table beside her glass. Rachel, he said quietly. We're done. The room fell silent again. No shouting, no chaos. Just the soft creak of wood and the faint sigh of wind, the sound of justice finishing its work. Justice doesn't need applause. It doesn't roar or demand attention. It only asks for one quiet moment and a truth spoken at the right time. 2 weeks had passed since that dinner where everything changed. Bend looked peaceful again, too peaceful, like a battlefield after the smoke clears, but before anyone dares to speak. The air was thin, washed clean by rain that never fell. Even the birds seemed quieter. Only the lake kept moving, ripples folding over one another, as if it still remembered what had been said that night. That morning I walked into the small cafe on Reed Market Road, the same one where Mary used to sit by the window reading the Oregon Daily with her cup of black coffee. They still used the same chipped mugs. The waitress still recognized me even after all these years. "Mr. Hayes the usual?" she asked. I nodded. She smiled a kind of smile that belongs to people who've lived long enough to understand that quiet doesn't mean peace. The TV above the counter flickered through the local news. And then there it was, Rachel's name scrolling across the ticker in bold white letters against a red band. Realtor Rachel Hayes under investigation for forgery and financial fraud. The anchor's voice stayed neutral, but the words sliced clean through the hum of the cafe. Investigators confirm the suspect used falsified documents to refinance property belonging to Mr. Richard Hayes. Bank officials have filed a civil suit, and further criminal charges may follow. The suspect is currently released on conditional bail. The world didn't pause. A spoon clinked against a cup, someone laughed from another table. But in my head, everything slowed to silence. I watched the steam rise from my coffee, turning the TV image into a blur of light and shadow. No joy, no victory. Just a stillness, the kind you feel when a structure finally settles after years of strain. Some punishments don't need a verdict. They arrive quietly, the moment a person finally sees what they've become. That afternoon, my phone rang. Michael. His voice trembled slightly, tired, stripped bare. "Dad, I'm sorry." I said nothing. Sometimes silence is the only way to make someone tell the truth. "I let her blind me," he continued. "I thought I was protecting us. But I wasn't protecting anything. I was just afraid of being wrong." The honesty in his voice cut deeper than any lie. "Dad," he whispered, "I don't know how to fix what I broke." I looked out over the lake, gray water, reflecting a gray sky, and said quietly, "Son, you don't fix what's broken by pretending it never happened. You start by telling the truth, even if you're the only one who hears it." There was a long pause, then just a breath. "Thank you," he said. "Not for forgiving me, but for waiting." When the line went dead, the click echoed in my ear, sharp, final, but somehow freeing. The hardest sound to hear is the one that means you've finally been forgiven, and you didn't even ask for it. The next morning, a courier knocked on my door. A plain manila envelope, no sender. Inside was a folded newspaper. Rachel's face filled half the front page, hair pulled back, sunglasses on her, expression blank and drained of all the confidence she once weaponized. The headline read, "From Rising Star to Exposed Fraud." Below it, a smaller caption, "Former real estate agent accused of forging legal documents to obtain property control. Investigation ongoing." I stared at the image for a long time. The woman who once filled rooms with certainty now looked like a shadow trying to hold itself together. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. There was nothing left to win. I folded the paper and set it down. Let the wind turn the pages on its own. Karma doesn't rush. It waits in the quiet corners of our choices, and when it finally moves, it doesn't need applause. That evening I heard the gravel crunch outside. Through the window I saw the old sedan stop by the porch. Michael stepped out carrying a small suitcase and the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from work, but from waking up to who you've been. He looked older than his years, not physically, but in the way grief changes the way someone stands. I moved out, he said simply. Everything of hers. I left behind. I nodded once, good. He followed me inside. Neither of us spoke for a while. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It just fit. He helped me light the fire. We sat across from each other, the glow flickering over the framed photo of Mary above the mantel. Michael stared into the flames. I thought love meant loyalty, he said quietly. But now I think love means seeing someone as they are, even when it hurts. I leaned forward, the firelight catching the edge of my glass. Love without truth is just fear, I said, and fear makes us obedient to the wrong people. He nodded, eyes reflecting the fire. For the first time I saw clarity in his face and something else, peace. Sometimes justice isn't punishment. It's realization, the kind that rebuilds you from the inside out. We carried the old files outside, the fake deeds, the bank letters, the photocopies of the forged signatures. They made a small, fragile tower on the porch. Michael handed me the matches. Are you sure? Yes, I said. The past doesn't need to be kept. It just needs to be buried right. The match hissed, then bloomed into gold. We stood side by side, watching the papers curl and darken, turning back into dust. The wind carried the ash across the yard, soft gray trails vanishing into the lake's reflection. For a while, neither of us spoke. Only the fire did crackling like an old voice that had waited too long to be heard. When it burned down to embers, we sat on the steps. The night air was cold, but clean, like something finally washed away. Above us, the clouds parted slowly, revealing the first stars in weeks. I poured 2 glasses of wine, handed one to Michael, set another beside Mary's chair. He smiled faintly. To Mom, I raised my glass. To the ones who saw farther than we did. We drank in silence. No words, no grand speeches, just the sound of crickets and the faint ripple of the lake. For the first time, silence didn't feel like a weight. It felt like completion. Justice isn't revenge. It's the moment you stop running from what's true. And karma, it doesn't strike like thunder. It waits quietly until you're ready to listen. I looked toward the lake, the surface shimmering under starlight. And for a breath, just one, I saw her. Mary. Smiling in the reflection, as if the night itself had borrowed her face. Her voice drifted through the wind, soft, almost a whisper. I told you, Richard. Never yield. The breeze carried the scent of lavender across the porch, the same kind she planted years ago. It lingered just long enough for me to close my eyes and smile. Summer 2025. Bend glowed beneath the sun. On the lake, ripples caught the light like fragments of broken mirrors, each shimmer a memory, each reflection a reminder that peace can exist after ruin. The lake house, the same house that had witnessed betrayal, truth, and quiet justice, had been repainted. The walls were white again. Not to hide what happened, but to prove that even scars can look like beginnings if you face them long enough. Behind the house, Mary's lavender bloomed again, bright, defiant, and fragrant enough to outlive grief. The air smelled of wood summer and renewal. I stood by the front gate looking at the small wooden sign I had carved myself. Mary's Workshop. A small summer craft class for local children, my idea, but her dream. The last promise I had left to keep. After loss, people need to build again. Not with wood or money, but with kindness, the kind someone once tried to take away. The first morning of the workshop, 10 children stood in the yard holding small pieces of scrap wood, their eyes bright with curiosity. Laughter echoed through the garden, bouncing off the lake's quiet surface. Michael drove up with Emily. He looked thinner, older, but peace had returned to his face. That was new. Emily ran toward me, her hair glinting in the sun. "Grandpa," she said, "why did Aunt Rachel leave that question soft, innocent, but sharper than any accusation?" I smiled, resting my hand gently on her shoulder. "Because sometimes, sweetheart," I said, "the ones who think they've already won are the first to lose." She tilted her head, thinking, then nodded like she somehow understood. And then she ran off again, joining the other kids, her laughter mixing with the sound of hammers and sunlight. I watched them build. The clack of wood, the smell of paint and sawdust, the sound of joy returning to a place that had forgotten how to hold it. The same dining room that once heard shouting and silence now echoed with laughter and lessons. That, I thought, was the kind of justice worth keeping quiet but alive. In the afternoon, Pastor Helen Brooks arrived. Same brown coat, same calm dignity. She walked through the garden, eyes softening at the sight of the children. "I heard about the workshop," she said, smiling. "Mary would be proud of you, Richard." I nodded. "I'm only doing what she dreamed of." Helen looked at the blooming lavender, her voice low but strong. "Forgiveness isn't weakness, Richard. It's wisdom. And wisdom keeps us from becoming the very people who hurt us." I didn't reply right away, because she was right, and yet part of me knew I hadn't forgiven. Not completely. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending Rachel had never existed. It meant refusing to let her define the rest of my life. Forgiveness isn't for others. It's how we reclaim our own freedom. By evening, the sun melted into gold across the lake. Michael helped me put away the tools, while Emily danced barefoot in the grass, her hands stained with blue paint and joy. The air was full of light. Laughter carried easily across the yard, where not long ago there had only been silence and regret. I sat down on the porch in the same old wooden chair Mary had loved. Steam rose from my cup of tea. Across the table, her photograph caught the last light of day, her smile glowing behind the glass. For a moment, I could almost believe she was there. "Do you see it, Mary?" I whispered. "The house still stands. The children are laughing again. And I kept my promise." A breeze came from the lake, soft and cool. The teacup beside hers trembled slightly, a single drop spilling onto the wood, leaving behind a perfect circular stain. A punctuation mark. A quiet full stop to a story that had run its course. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's just a quiet dinner and a smile that fades. The world slowed. The garden shimmered under evening light. Lavender swayed like purple waves in the breeze. In the distance, the church bells began to ring, soft, deliberate, their echoes drifting over the lake. It wasn't grief anymore. It wasn't victory either. It was something gentler. A reminder that justice exists, not always loud, not always swift, but certain and patient. Michael came out onto the porch, his sleeves rolled up, a faint smile on his face. "Dad," he said quietly, "I think she'd be proud." I nodded. "I think so too." We sat together watching Emily chase fireflies in the last light of summer. Her laughter carried through the twilight, and I realized it sounded exactly like Mary's once did when the world was still simple. As the sun disappeared behind the trees, I raised my cup once more, the tea now cool, the air fragrant with lavender. Peace isn't the absence of pain. It's what remains after pain has finished teaching you. I looked at the lake gold fading into blue and whispered to the wind, maybe this stillness is the reward. And for a second, just before the last light faded, I thought I saw her again. Mary, standing in the reflection of the water, smiling softly, as if to say, "You did it, Richard. You finally came home." The bells rang once more, and this time they didn't sound like endings, but beginnings. If you've ever been underestimated, remember calm is sometimes the strongest form of revenge. Share your thoughts below. I read every one. Like, share, and subscribe to hear more stories where justice arrives quietly and always on time.